Imagine if one decision changed everything. One person, one night, one choice that nobody in history ever made. What if on a single night in 48 BC, when Alexandria's greatest library was burning, someone made a choice that saved everything? Not by protecting the building, by destroying it strategically, by scattering its knowledge across the entire world so it could never be burned again. This is what our world would look like if that one decision had been made. And spoiler alert, it's not what you think. Because this is a story about how humanity became great not because we inherited knowledge, but because we had to earn it. Era 1, the distribution. 48 BC, the moment everything changes. Caesar's army descends on Alexandria. Fire spreads across the city like a living thing. The docks ignite. Ships carrying papyrus scrolls explode in flames. Thick black smoke rises over the Mediterranean, visible from miles away. In the heart of the city, the head librarian watches his life's work burning. Thousands of texts, millions of hours of research, all of it turning to ash and smoke. But then something happens that history never recorded. The head librarian makes a choice. He doesn't try to save the building. He can't. It's already lost. Instead, he does something impossible. He gathers his most trusted scribes and tells them the truth. They can't save the library, but they can save what matters. Over 3 desperate nights, knowing the city is falling, knowing that soldiers are closing in, they work without sleeping. They copy the most critical texts. Not everything. There's no time for everything, but the most important discoveries, the rarest treatises, the mathematical proofs, the astronomical calculations, the medical knowledge that took centuries to accumulate. And then, this is the crucial part, they don't copy them to be forgotten in a hidden monastery. They don't bury them, they distribute them. One scribe takes a bundle to Damascus, another to Jerusalem, another to Antioch, another to Pergamon, another to Syracuse. They scatter like seeds across the Mediterranean world. Not copies of copies, not degraded versions, original texts, the actual works of Archimedes, the actual medical treatises of Hippocrates, the actual astronomical calculations of Hipparchus. When Caesar's army finally reaches the library, they find it burning. But it's too late. The knowledge has escaped. The words are already spreading. Era 2. Rome becomes invincible. 100 AD to 300 AD. Roman engineers suddenly have access to something nobody else has. Archimedes' complete mathematical treatises. Not fragments that require interpretation, complete proofs showing the principles of hydraulics, explaining how water moves, how pressure works, how screws can lift water against gravity. They don't discover these principles through trial and error. They don't spend years testing configurations. They have the answers written down, proven mathematically, explained in detail by a genius who lived 200 years ago. The Roman Empire's infrastructure becomes incomprehensibly advanced for its time. The aqueducts they build aren't just functional, they're elegant, efficient, designed using pure mathematics. They last longer than they should. They carry more water than seems physically possible. Visitors from other nations come to witness the engineering marvels, the sophistication, the precision, the scale. They stand before these structures and wonder, how did they understand this? The answer is simple. They didn't figure it out, they learned it. From a man who lived 300 years before them. Rome doesn't just conquer the world through military force, it dominates through technological superiority. Not because Romans are inherently smarter, but because they have access to 500 years of Greek scientific advancement all at once. The infrastructure is so advanced that other nations can't compete. Other empires can't match Rome's engineering. Rome becomes not just an empire, it becomes a civilization that seems to operate on principles beyond the understanding of the outside world. Era 3, the Islamic Golden Age accelerates. 750 AD to 1000 AD. In Baghdad, when the House of Wisdom is founded, scholars don't start from scratch. They have complete texts from Alexandria, geometry from Euclid and Archimedes, astronomy from Hipparchus and Ptolemy, medical knowledge accumulated from centuries of Greek and Egyptian physicians. But more importantly, they have evidence that advanced knowledge is possible. The humans had figured things out, that solutions exist. They just need to find them again, improve them, and push forward. The Islamic Golden Age doesn't just happen, it accelerates dramatically. By 850 AD, Islamic scholars have developed algebra far beyond what Al-Khwarizmi discovered in our timeline. They have complete access to ancient Greek mathematical thinking. They're not rediscovering it, they're building on it. But by 900 AD, something truly extraordinary occurs. Islamic mathematicians working from preserved Archimedes notes on curves and motion, combined with Greek geometric principles refined over centuries, develop something that won't be solved for another 1,000 years in our timeline. They develop calculus. Not Newton, not Leibniz, a coalition of brilliant minds in Baghdad and Damascus and Alexandria, working with knowledge that has never been lost, figure out how to calculate curves, how to find limits, how to understand motion not through philosophy, but through mathematics. They call it different names, but they've done it. With calculus in the 9th century, physics becomes a real science, not philosophy, actual mechanics, actual understanding of forces and motion and energy. By 1000 AD, something extraordinary happens. Telescopes exist. Not crude versions, precise instruments, because the mathematics of optics has been worked out completely. Craftsmen understanding the mathematical principles of how lenses work build telescopes. Real ones, effective ones. When someone points a telescope at the sky in 1000 AD, instead of seeing stars, they see moons. They see that Jupiter has objects orbiting it. They see the structure of the solar system. They see that the Earth is not the center of everything. This knowledge doesn't stay hidden. It spreads across the medieval world like fire.
Era 4. Europe awakens and steam power begins. 1100 AD to 1300 AD. When preserved texts reach monastic libraries in Europe, the Church doesn't resist, it bends. It realizes the ancient world understood things we've been teaching incorrectly for centuries. By 1100 AD, instead of monks just copying manuscripts, monks are building instruments. They have Archimedes' work on circles and geometry. They have engineering treatises on mechanics. They have Hero of Alexandria's complete works on mechanical devices. They build the first steam engines, not in 1760, in 1150 AD. Not coal-powered factories, but functional steam engines, atmospheric engines designed using principles worked out 1,000 years before. They use them to power monastery mills, to operate machinery for grain milling, to pump water for irrigation. The technology is crude by later standards, but it works. People understand why it works because they have the mathematical principles written down, explained, proven. By 1200 AD, the Industrial Revolution isn't happening in Britain in the 18th century. It's already happening in Europe. Steam power spreads across the continent, production increases dramatically, food becomes abundant, population explodes. But literacy explodes too. If you need to understand mechanical systems, you need to read. You need mathematics. Libraries become essential. Every city wants one. Universities establish rapidly everywhere because there's demonstrated need. Education becomes a foundation of society, not an oddity. Era 5. The Plague's Mercy. 1340 AD to 1360 AD. The Black Death still comes. Death still spreads. But this time, physicians have something different. 2,000 years of preserved medical knowledge from Alexandria. Not superstition, not bleeding to balance humors, actual observation from centuries of medical practice. They understand that disease spreads through contact, not through miasma, not through evil humors, through contact, transmission. Understanding this, they implement quarantine, isolation, cleanliness as medical necessity, not religious ritual, medical necessity. The death toll is lower, not prevented, plague is still plague, but reduced significantly. Maybe 30% of Europe dies instead of 40%, maybe 40% instead of 60%. Millions of lives saved by knowledge that had been lost for 1,200 years in our timeline. Millions more people alive, millions more hands to build, millions more minds to create. A continent that's still functional, still capable of recovery, still viable. Era 6, the Age of Exploration, begins early, 1400 AD to 1450 AD. Portuguese navigators working from Greek astronomical knowledge that's been continuously improved for 1,500 years have already mapped Africa's coastlines. They're already charting paths across the Atlantic using instruments that shouldn't exist for another century. They crossed the ocean in 1420 instead of 1492, 70 years earlier. They bring ships built using engineering and metallurgy principles worked out for centuries, not wooden vessels held together with hope. Ships designed using mathematics, ships built on principles that Archimedes had already solved. The world connects earlier, but it connects differently, with more knowledge, with scientific approach instead of pure conquest. When explorers encounter new lands, they don't approach it purely as conquest, they approach it as investigation. They measure, they record, they try to understand. They're still colonizers, still brutal. Humans don't change that much, but they're informed colonizers. They understand disease because of medical texts. They understand their ships because of engineering. They're more dangerous because they're less ignorant. Era 7. Science becomes inevitable. 1600 AD to 1750 AD. Isaac Newton doesn't discover calculus. He reads it in Archimedes' complete works. He thinks, well, obviously. His genius is applying already known mathematics to new problems: gravity, motion, light. By 1750 AD, electricity has been understood for 200 years. The mathematical principles were worked out early enough that every educated scientist understands how electrons behave, how circuits work, how currents flow. When Alessandro Volta invents the battery, he's not inventing something completely new, he's implementing principles that have been theoretical for centuries. Nikola Tesla comes along 50 years earlier, not inventing wireless transmission from scratch, perfecting a concept that's been actively pursued since 1600. Engineers and scientists have been working on this problem for 150 years by the time he arrives. By 1850, wireless transmission isn't a fringe idea, it's inevitable. Everyone understands why it should work. Everyone expects it to be built. Nikola Tesla doesn't die broke and forgotten, he's celebrated. The entire world runs on wireless power transmission, not one tower that gets dismantled, a global network. Redundant, resilient, impossible to shut down. Free energy, transmitted wirelessly, available to everyone equally. By 1920, the global network is operational at scale, powering civilization. Era 8. Nuclear power, not weapons. 1900 AD to 1950 AD. By 1900, nuclear physics has been understood for 30 years already. Not shocking discovery, the inevitable conclusion of 2,000 years of mathematical and physical knowledge. By 1930, nuclear energy is being harnessed. By 1940, instead of a desperate race to build nuclear weapons, the world has nuclear power plants, hundreds of them. Every major nation has nuclear reactors. Energy is abundant. Energy is democratic. World War II still happens. Humanity doesn't transcend violence just because knowledge is preserved, but without atomic desperation, without the fear that the other side might build it first, nobody uses the bomb. 20 million die instead of 50 million. By 1950, the world has completely diverged. Energy is abundant everywhere. Prosperity is distributed. Nations don't compete for resources because resources are essentially unlimited when energy is free. There's no Cold War, no superpower struggle, no existential competition. Era 9. Climate change prevented. 1850 AD to 1950 AD. By 1900, meteorology, built on 2,000 years of scientific method, sees climate change coming. The mathematics predict it, the data show it clearly. By 1950, we solve it. Carbon sequestration becomes industrial. Renewable energy replaces fossil fuels. The atmosphere is carefully managed. The planet doesn't heat catastrophically because we fixed it 70 years before it became a crisis. Forests don't burn. Coastlines don't flood. Species don't go extinct.
Era 10. The perfect world that stagnated. 2024 AD. The world has everything. Free wireless energy everywhere. No disease, no hunger, no war. Climate perfect. Technology distributed globally. Instant quantum-entangled communication across the planet. Loneliness is a choice. Resources are infinite. Every problem solved. But nobody goes to space. In our timeline, we went to the moon in 1969 because we were desperate, because we feared our enemy, because we had to. Kennedy said, "We go not because it is easy, but because it is hard." In this timeline, there's no desperation, no competition, no reason to leave. Earth is perfect. Earth is enough. Space exploration is a hobby, a curiosity. Nobody has the drive to need to reach Mars. Nobody feels desperate enough to spend trillions leaving a perfect world. They've solved every problem, and without problems, there's no innovation. Without obstacles, there's no drive to overcome them. They have perfect technology, but they don't have vision. They have answers, but no questions. They have solutions, but no hunger. Population is triple what it is in our world, because fewer people died from plague, war, famine. Resources are stretched thin despite abundance. The oceans are overfished, the land is overgrazed. They have everything except why. The revelation, why we became great. And here's the twist nobody expected. In our timeline, the library burned. Civilization collapsed, the Dark Ages came, knowledge was lost, progress halted, millions died. And in that darkness, desperation drove innovation. We had to solve problems or die, so we solved them. We reached the moon not because we wanted to explore, because our enemy threatened us. We discovered antibiotics not because it was interesting, because disease was killing us. We decoded DNA not for knowledge, because we needed answers to survival. We invented electricity not because it was fun, because we needed light and power. We created artificial intelligence not because we wanted to, because we needed to solve problems faster. We touched the edges of the universe not because we had solved everything on Earth, because we were desperate to understand our place in the cosmos. We didn't inherit a perfect world. We built it through desperation and brilliance and refusal to accept defeat. We became great because we had to. Maybe the library burning wasn't tragedy. Maybe it was the greatest gift humanity ever received. Because without loss, without struggle, without the desperate need to survive, we never would have reached so far. We never would have touched the stars. We never would have become what we are. Alexandria's knowledge could have given humanity everything, but it would have taken away the one thing that makes us human, the drive to become more than we are. The preserved texts wouldn't have freed us. They would have imprisoned us in someone else's solutions. We needed to struggle. We needed to suffer to become human. The burning library wasn't the death of human potential, it was the birth of it. Everything we became through loss. Everything we achieved because we had no choice but to achieve it. Maybe losing everything taught us how to become everything. Maybe we're the lucky ones. Maybe burning the library was the best thing that ever happened to us.